I don't know, is it good? I hope it's good. I bet it's great.
It wasn't good. With its final season coming to a close, the Umbrella Academy has entered itself into the Hall of Shame, inadvertently making its case for having one of the worst endings of all time.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
The fourth and final season of the beloved show left most fans feeling extremely unsatisfied with the direction that the writers decided to take things. It was a shock to many that the Umbrella Academy could have such a fall from grace, but there were warning signs along the way. The first and most obvious was upon its renewal for season 4, the episode count was dropped from its usual 10 to only 6. And as a result, the writing team was forced to abandon plot lines and ideas they set up in previous seasons. 6 episodes also did not feel like a sufficient amount of time to wrap everything up in a satisfying way that answered some of the show's long-running mysteries. Now, after seeing what the writers delivered in the 6 episodes they were given, I don't necessarily think having more episodes would have saved the season, but seeing the episode count drop before the season aired did not give me confidence that season 4 would be up to par with the rest of the series. There were also a few quotes from the cast in interviews that seemed to be trying to temper fan expectations.
Fans, expect nothing and you will gain everything.
And I think it's good for fans to get that sort of resolution, whether it pisses them off. You know, I don't think a lot of people are going to be very happy. I wasn't.
It's clear some of the cast seemed to love the final season, but some seemed more reserved in discussing their feelings on it. And perhaps the most obvious sign of the Umbrella Academy's impending downfall was seeing that Klaus cut his hair, truly an omen of the disaster to come. I feel like season 4 is lacking many of the things that made the previous seasons so enjoyable, and instead it offers up bland, predictable slop until it jumps the shark in episode 5 and becomes truly bad. In this video, I will be taking a look at season 4 of the Umbrella Academy in detail, and trying to find out if it being considered one of the worst endings of all time is hyperbolic or cold hard truth. I will be going into full spoilers, so this is your warning.
Diego, will you change that song? I can't!
In my season 3 video, I talked about how the Umbrella Academy is a master of creating a fun environment, walking the perfect tightrope where you can have a 5-minute dance break and still be able to take the show and its end of the world stakes seriously. I feel like this is a difficult tone to cultivate, and in previous seasons they managed to achieve this, which allowed them to create some of the show's most iconic moments that let the audience get swept away with the excitement. Season 4 attempts to recapture the same feeling, but fails in just about every sense. The season's big fun moments feel like they were written by a group of people who hadn't seen the previous seasons, and were told to write something wacky. I think a prime example of this is the Baby Shark road trip. The idea for the scene I actually don't think is terrible, as it aims to recreate the feeling of a family road trip where you've been locked in the car for hours, your siblings are getting on your last nerve, and your dad is threatening to turn this car right around if you don't knock it off. But where I feel the road trip scene fails in the show is that it goes on for way too long, and it takes everything to the extreme. First is the music, and how Diego is listening to Baby Shark on cassette tape, which is conveniently stuck. He can't turn the volume down or turn it off, except, you know, later when the show doesn't want to have Baby Shark in the background of a serious conversation. The writing is trying to force us into Vomit Fest 2024, so as characters like Diego make weird decisions like refusing to pull over to let the umbrellas puke. He simultaneously loves his van and doesn't want anything to happen to it, and is also not concerned when people are telling him that they're about to puke in it. As the show did its best to recreate Family Guy's infamous Epicac scene, I couldn't help but feel annoyed. The scene could have been even worse, as originally the song meant to be in this scene was Baby Finger Where Are You?
It was actually a different song when we were filming, and so, which Baby Shark is much better.
It was just weird. Wasn't it called like
Daddy Fingers?
Daddy Finger, Daddy Finger.
I guess we have to say thanks for the small blessings. The show fails in a few of its other attempts of creating this fun atmosphere, like in the new Grumpson fight, where they are attacked by a dual-wielding Santa. It felt like a half-baked idea that was little more than, hey, wouldn't it be funny if they had to fight Santa?
He's Santa! You killed him!
It's made worse by the fact that if the people of New Grumpson didn't attack the umbrellas, they likely would have just left, as they had no idea how to find Bennifer, and the town itself seemed inconspicuous. By attacking them, they give up the game and indicate that the town is not what it appears to be, and is actually hiding something. Easily the worst attempt at fun by the show this season is Klaus's B-plot, where he is made into a sex slave. Klaus is taken captive and forced to let ghosts possess his body so that the customers can have sex with deceased loved ones. This is some truly dark and twisted stuff, but the show plays it entirely for laughs. Haha, look at Klaus be possessed and forced to have sex so he can pay for his freedom. Classic comedy. Klaus's sex slave plotline is also bad for the fact that it is generally just poorly written, doing nothing for the main narrative of the season and treating one of its main characters extremely poorly. The only sequence that I think captures some of the early season Umbrella Academy fun is Luther and Diego's visit to the CIA. It serves a narrative purpose in outing the CIA as keepers, is central to Diego's character development for the season, and gives us an incredibly fun fight with Diego and Luther hyping each other up. It was one of the few truly fun moments in the season full of cringe and contrivances.
For the sake of discussion, let's say this is legit. Does anyone here actually want their power back?
In the season 3 finale, the umbrellas are sucked dry of all the marigold in their system and are spawned in a new timeline without any of their powers. When it was announced that season 4 was only 6 episodes, this got me concerned about this particular plot point. I assumed there was some plan to explore the powerless umbrellas over the course of a few episodes in the originally planned 10-episode season. But because the season only had 6 episodes, I kind of knew that they would have to get their powers back right away. Unfortunately, what I think this does is make the entire plot point of them losing their powers feel irrelevant. The idea of the umbrellas being forced to live normal lives and to try and adjust to their new reality could have actually been pretty interesting, but because they are only powerless for a single episode, this is barely explored in any meaningful way. I also have a gripe with how their powers are handled when they get them back. I was curious to see if they would get all of their same powers back, or if they would get entirely new powers. However, what actually happens is weirdly inconsistent. Some characters like Diego and Klaus get their powers back almost exactly, while other characters like Ben and Viktor pretty much have the same powers with a slight difference, like Ben's tentacles being on his back instead of his tummy, and Viktor glowing red instead of blue. Allison gets her powers back, except a more powerful version of them, and Lila gets her normal powers back, plus laser eyes for some reason. Five has his powers nerfed, as he can now pretty much only blink to the train station, something that is never really explained. Weirdest is Luther, who gets his power of super strength back, but is also given a monkey body, something that was never actually a part of his powers, but was a result of a life-saving surgery he was forced to undergo. I think the writers just wanted Luther back in his gorilla suit, but there does not seem to be any rhyme or reason for the Umbrella's powers. The Umbrellas and their powers actually have some major implications for the season, and leads to one of the season's main plot holes, but I will discuss that later in the video.
Oh God, I'm gonna miss you guys.
The heart of the Umbrella Academy has always been the characters and their family dynamic. The cast is so charismatic and likable, and every season we get to see them grow and progress in new and interesting ways. Unfortunately, I think this season failed most of its characters, putting too much focus on the end of the world stakes instead of the personal journeys of our favorite misfits.
Hey, I am a professional dancer.
It became abundantly clear this season that the show does not respect Luther as a character. In my previous video, I compared Luther's trajectory to Thor from the MCU, starting out as a very serious character, and as the story progressed, leaning more and more into a comedic role. However, even if Season 3 Luther was a bit of a goofball, he still had meaningful moments of personal growth that grounded him as a character. The things that jump immediately to mind are his relationship with Sloane, his desire to mediate the Umbrella-Sparrow conflict, and his conversation with his father in the penultimate episode of the season. In Season 4, Luther is stripped of any emotional nuance or self-reflection. He isn't treated as a multi-dimensional character with his own set of motivations and goals, but as a walking punchline. After the time jump, he is a happy idiot, working as a stripper, living in a rundown building, driving a busted car, and behaving like a man-child, while the whole time acting like everything is fine.
Do you want to know what Luther is when we find him? I said, yeah. And he said, he's a male stripper. And I thought he was joking. I was genuine, like he's having me on.
Him having a goofy exterior is okay if the writers explore his hidden depths, but they never do, leaving him feeling more like a cartoon character than an actual person. The most impactful moment we get with Luther is in episode 1, when Diego is complaining about his life, and Luther laments how he and Sloane would have loved to have what Diego has.
Some people were killed to have what you have. You know? I mean, I know Sloane and I would be killed to have this.
In fact, it's one of only 2 times that Sloane is even mentioned this season. For a character as important as she was, it feels like a massive abandoned plotline for Sloane to just completely disappear, and for the season to start after Luther has already given up hope of ever finding her. By abandoning the Sloane plotline, they really give Luther nothing to do, and nothing to ground his character. Funnily enough, probably the best Luther scene of Season 4 didn't even make the final cut. There's a deleted scene of Luther talking about how he failed Ben for forcing him to go on the mission, and how he wished he would have stood up to their father.
Ben didn't even want to go on that mission, man. I forced him. Why could I never stand up to Dad? I should have stood up for Ben.
It's a really impactful moment, and I have no idea why it was cut.
I've been sleepwalking through my own life. Meanwhile, I'm married to the hottest, smartest, most psychotic chick on the planet.
Diego is one of the few characters that I think the show actually does a decent job with this season. It feels like a continuation of his story from Season 3, as when we find him this season, he has a family with Lila. Having lost his powers, Diego is forced to get a job as a postman to support his family. Over the 6 years, he has grown tired of his mundane life, searching to recapture the old thrills of missions and his previous vigilantism. He takes his relationship with Lila for granted, as they find themselves stuck in a rut, even if he still loves her. As the season goes on, he gets to experience the rush of a mission, he gets his powers back, and he could potentially go back to a life of exciting crime fighting. When he is allowed to visit the CIA, he feels like his dreams are all coming true, and he can escape from his monotonous life. However, it's at the CIA that he learns everything that he would be giving up to live this life of adventure, and he ultimately decides that his marriage and family are more important to him and not worth sacrificing for some fleeting excitement. He comes back a new man, ready to recommit himself to his family. It's not the most complex arc ever told, but I think it is done pretty efficiently. One thing that I have to criticize though, even if it's not of any real consequence, is the running gag throughout the season where they're calling Diego fat. It seems like a really poorly thought out gag, as the show is trying to convince us that Diego let himself go and is in full dad bod territory, only for him to shed his tarp in the CIA fight scene to reveal that the man is absolutely yoked. In what universe is this man fat? Like I said, it doesn't really matter, but it seems like pretty lazy writing to constantly make fat jokes at someone as jacked as Diego.
Good, because I'm done being the bad guy in this family.
After the events of Season 3, the show tried to do some major damage control with Allison. I feel like the 6-year time jump actually robbed Allison of a lot of interesting material that we could have seen. During the season, we learned that at some point, Ray left Allison, but we never really explore as to why he left. Did he find out what Allison did to bring about this reality, and he couldn't abide by that and left? Did he feel like he was ripped from his proper time and didn't want to live in this new foreign reality? I feel like there could have been some really interesting stuff done with Allison's character and her relationships with Ray and Claire, and how she was responsible for bringing them into this reality. However, it's almost entirely unexplored in favor of less interesting storylines. In fact, all of the fallout from Allison's Season 3 actions are glossed over because of the time skip. We never get to see the other Umbrellas come to terms with what Allison did, or how that affects their relationship moving forward. We are essentially told at the start of the season that everyone is over it and has moved on, and the audience should move on as well.
I don't.
So I feel like Allison isn't really left to do much, nor is she really forced to reflect on her previous actions and grow from them. She feels like a ton of wasted potential this season.
And I'm not going back to that old Klaus.
Klaus feels weirdly sidelined this season. Klaus being left behind in the van pretty much sums up his contributions to the main storyline. Instead, he is given his own B-plot, sending him into the life of a sex slave as he is taken captive by a drug lord. There are many issues with this plotline, one of which is how the storyline essentially regresses Klaus's character. During the third season of the show, Klaus's arc centered on him searching for a purpose, confronting his fears, and learning to master his powers. In what I still think is one of the most impactful scenes in the series, Klaus goes to the mausoleum, which was the cause of so much of his childhood trauma, and faces his fear of the dead head on, mastering his powers and achieving self-actualization. He no longer needs to rely on previous coping mechanisms like drugs and alcohol to free him from the burden of his powers. He has become a person in control of their own destiny. Season 4 walks so much of this character development back, with Klaus instantly heading straight for a relapse the second he regains his powers. For whatever reason, he is once again terrified of his powers and tries to escape through drugs. I really don't care for Klaus's storyline this season, because not only does it not have any plot relevance, but I think it actively harms Klaus's characterization. There are a couple of ideas expressed that I think had potential, but I think were ultimately mishandled or didn't amount to anything. For instance, after Klaus has become the Master of Death, immortal, to have him become powerless and now be just as vulnerable as anyone else to dying is a very interesting idea. I think Safety Klaus is actually a good idea to initially take his character given the circumstances of where he is at the start of the season.
I was such a loser. The drugs, the sex, all that fast food. I was so miserable.
After feeling invulnerable, he now feels hyper vulnerable, and as a result, overcompensates. Another good idea that had meh execution was Klaus being buried alive.
What are you doing? I'm burying you. I'm alive! I'm alive!
The idea of being buried alive, completely helpless, as you are destined to die and reanimate over and over again, is horrifying. I mean, he could just choose not to come back to life, like we learn he can do at the end of season 3. But still, it's a pretty scary idea. It's also kind of funny that in Misfits, Robert Sheehan's character, who has a very similar power set, finds himself in a similar predicament.
Were you having a wank in there?
Yeah, so off I was. Man can't enjoy a quick shuffle in his own coffin.
Where I think the buried alive idea falters in the Umbrella Academy is where Klaus needs to be rescued by Allison and Claire. In the show, Claire literally says that Klaus can save himself.
Why do you keep trying to save someone who can literally save himself?
Being a pet cemetery and once again having his powers, I feel like Klaus should have been able to animate the dead dogs and have them dig him up. By needing to be rescued, I feel like it does little to develop Klaus in any meaningful way. Funnily enough, some of Klaus's best scenes were cut from the season. One has Klaus talking to Lila's family at the birthday party, where they are asking him about the Hargreaves siblings.
Who's the really screwed up one? Yeah.
You know, the thieving, cheating addict?
I think this helps to further explain Klaus's new persona and why he has become Mr. Responsible, not wanting to be seen as the drug addict, scumbag screw-up others might see the old him as. The AA deleted scene also does a good job tying a bow on his journey this season.
Both know how miserable you were.
You do not get to decide what I do with my life.
He can't give you what you need.
With the Five and Lila plot, we have reached the elephant in the room. I cannot state enough how I think pairing these two together in a romantic context was a mistake.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
In the past 2 seasons, I think these two characters had a very interesting and playful dynamic, as they were more often than not pitted against each other or forced to team up as unlikely allies. However, I think pushing this relationship into more than it was originally intended to be actively hurts all of the characters involved and the story at large. Similar to Diego, the start of Lila's story this season has her questioning the life she is living as a stay-at-home mom, yearning for excitement and getting it as she goes undercover to infiltrate the Keepers. However, where Diego comes to the realization that what he really wants is a life with his wife and kids, Lila goes on a doomed escapade with Five, gets stuck in the train station, and ultimately cheats on Diego. Now, while I actually think the opening to episode 5 and the time-lapse of the pair lost in this place between timelines is actually pretty cool, what it results in, the Five and Lila relationship, doesn't work for a number of reasons. Showrunner Steve Blackman argues that it feels earned because they spend 7 years together, completely isolated from everyone but each other.
So the idea of spending 7 years together made sense that something would have happened. I thought it paid off. The fans were going to have a lot of different opinions about it, but I really think it's sweet.
I don't doubt that something romantic would form. Heck, the last time Five was stuck in isolation, he started hooking up with a mannequin. Being with a living, breathing woman, there was zero chance Five wasn't going to catch feelings. However, even if it makes sense in the context of the universe, it doesn't work from an audience's perspective. It may have been 7 years for the characters, but for the audience, it's been like 5 minutes. It feels more shocking than it does a natural progression of these two characters, because we're only given a montage to buy into the relationship.
One of the writers kind of accidentally told me that that was going to happen, like at the premiere last season, and I thought that they were joking, because I was like, I literally laughed and I was like, haha.
Also, the fact that it is introduced in the second last episode of the entire series means that it has no room whatsoever to breathe and develop. It becomes a massive distraction for the finale. When the climax of the season is going on with the Umbrellas fighting / trying to save Ben, the love triangle that they just introduced has Diego and especially Five acting up.
Don't talk to my wife like that, man. Not around here. Not during Christmas.
You gonna do something about it, fuckface?
Five goes on multiple tirades, insulting Diego and essentially saying he is the better man for Lila. It culminates in Five and Diego completely ignoring the giant monster they are supposed to be fighting, to instead try and beat the hell out of each other.
I wanna fucking kill him.
Five literally says that he wants to kill Diego before blinking away, with no intention of returning, leaving his family to die. This feels completely antithetical to Five as a character. One of the driving forces for Five over the seasons has been his love for his family and his desire to save them. Yeah, he thinks that they are a bunch of useless idiots, but at the end of the day, he will do anything for them and loves them deeply. Having Five go so far off the deep end puts a bad taste in my mouth. This conflict between Five and Diego also serves to undermine the emotional goodbye the characters are giving. It's hard to fully buy into them saying how much they loved each other when not 10 minutes earlier, Five said he wanted to kill Diego. The Five-Lila love story does nothing but hurt the characters, undermine the big emotional ending, and enrage the majority of fans.
You and me, we're connected somehow.
Ben is simultaneously at the center of the story this season and not given much to do. His partner Bennifer is more a plot device than an actual character, and so much of her relationship with Ben is based on this connection that we can't really explain, which does little to get the audience invested in them. They only have a few scenes to actually form an on-screen bond, resulting in the unexplained connection doing most of the heavy lifting for their actions and motivations. We are told they are meant to be together, but we don't really know why, other than the fact of Marigold and Durango. We learn about how our original Ben actually died in the long-anticipated Bennifer incident, but this ultimately fell flat. It also retroactively kills some of the intrigue from previous seasons, where the characters would talk about the Bennifer incident, but we now know that none of them actually even knew what happened.
My whole life, all I wanted was for you to see me, to make me a part of the team.
Viktor had a pretty decent season, though nothing really noteworthy. His story this season mostly focuses on his relationship with his father and overcoming the feelings of inadequacy that he has felt as a result of being othered as a child. I think there is an interesting dynamic between Viktor and Reginald, as they have entirely opposite opinions on how to deal with the Ben situation and coming cleanse. It makes sense that Viktor would be willing to risk the world to try and save Ben, as it's pretty similar to season 3. 3 when he was trying to save Harlan. There's a nice scene where after saving Reginald, Viktor finally gets some validation from his father as he tells him that he is worthy of being on the team, just like the rest of his siblings.
It's possible the old man's reset didn't take.
What does that even mean?
I have no idea.
Plot holes, plot holes, plot holes. That might as well be the official slogan of the Umbrella Academy Season 4, as it feels like the entire season falls apart at even the tiniest bit of scrutiny. I think it's best to address the one I had the biggest issue with first. The entire reason that they need to activate the cleanse and destroy all of the other timelines is because no matter what, if the Umbrellas exist, they cause a world-ending event.
A family is the problem. We're doomed to save or destroy the world over and over again ad infinitum.
The only way to avoid an infinite cycle of apocalypses and trying to prevent them is if the Umbrellas never existed, meaning that they were never exposed to Marigold or born in the first place. However, in the timeline that Reginald and Allison create at the end of Season 3, none of the Umbrellas have any powers. This is potentially because they were sucked dry of their Marigold at the end of Season 3 as a means of fueling Reggie's reset machine, or simply because in this reality, Reginald never released Marigold into the world because Abigail wasn't dead, and thus he wasn't mourning her. So for all intents and purposes, the Umbrellas are just regular schmucks, incapable of ending the world. The problem is solved. They don't have to do anything, and they can live their normal lives peacefully.
Another job well done.
In order for them to get powers and Marigold back into their system, the show needs to create a situation where they get their powers back. And so, they come up with this convoluted idea of Abigail giving them a jar of Marigold. This undermines the idea that it is inevitable that the Umbrellas will cause the apocalypse, because the only reason they are able to do so in this instance is because Abigail reintroduces them to Marigold. She had all the power to prevent any apocalypse by just not doing anything. The motivation they give Abigail for doing this seems very superficial and doesn't fully make sense, as it mostly boils down to not wanting to be brought back to life and feeling like she should be punished for discovering Marigold in the first place and destroying her planet.
Dying was my penance for creating something so deadly.
As poetic of an idea as it is for the Umbrellas to admit that they are the problem and unexist themselves to save the world, it doesn't work when they aren't the actual problem. It's Reginald and Abigail. This doesn't even bother to ask the question, what about the other children immaculately conceived by Marigold? Do they exist in this timeline as well? Do they have powers? I think they could have gotten away with something surrounding one of the other unclaimed children causing the apocalypse, as they were not drained of their Marigold like the Umbrellas were. By not addressing them at all, I can only assume they don't exist in this timeline, and are therefore not a doomsday waiting to happen. I feel like there are a ton of unanswered questions and plot holes surrounding the Bennifer incident. When we find Bennifer, she is found in the belly of a squid at the age of 6 and is talking about the cleanse. What's up with that? Like any of it. Did Durango impregnate the squid with a 6-year-old human? We know that Reginald released the Marigold onto Earth, but who released the Durango? We literally know nothing about Durango, to the point that it feels like a bit of an ass pull by the writers.
A second particle was created, Durango.
On the actual mission of the Bennifer incident, why did Reginald send the Umbrellas to destroy Bennifer, instead of sending a team of hired mercenaries that didn't have Marigold in their system? It seems like one of the things he most wants to prevent is the Umbrellas coming in contact with Bennifer. So why risk the end of the world on the word of a teenager? Also, in the current timeline, when New Grumpson is alerted and Bennifer runs away with Ben, the soldiers say that they can't kill the girl. Why?
Remember, we can't hurt the girl.
It's what alternate timeline Reggie wanted to do, and is eventually what this timeline Reggie wants to do. So why not just kill her? It feels like it would solve his problem, and it's not like Reginald would break a moral sweat over it. More to the fact is that even though Ben was shot and killed from behind, did he never ask Klaus, and all the time he was a ghost, about how he died? Even if Klaus had been mind wiped by that point, Ghost Ben wouldn't have been, and when none of his siblings would be able to tell him how he died, despite witnessing it, I feel like he would be asking some questions, and as a result, so would Klaus. I also feel like Lila saving her family and Claire didn't really make that much sense. If the Umbrellas never existed, that means that their kids should have never existed either. The show tries to get around this by putting the family on the train, implying that when it stops, they get off at the true timeline. But how can the subway station even exist if there were no umbrellas or marigold? I feel like they should cease to exist. But the show wants to insist that they survived and live happily in the prime timeline. At best, it feels like a massive cop-out, and at worst, a massive plot hole. It honestly feels like there are even more plot holes to discuss, but for the sake of this video not being too long, I'll leave it there.
Everybody coming together when it really matters. One big, real family.
I gave Season 3 its fair share of criticism, but I feel like it executed similar ideas to Season 4's ending in a more meaningful and impactful way. In both cases, the umbrellas are at a fork in the road. They can either continue to fight, or they can embrace the end. In Season 3, we get some great moments between the siblings as they share in each other's company, drinking in the moment, and savoring their time together. There are some genuinely touching moments as they wait for the end, trying to make peace with the lives they lived and the time they have left. In Season 4, by the time they get to the realization that they need to allow themselves to be cleansed, none of the big emotional moments are really hitting as they are bogged down by the Fivela-Diego love triangle and so many plot holes that the audience no longer trusts the story they are being told. There was also a sense throughout the series finale that they had this same debate in similar moments only 6 episodes prior. It feels like the show is repeating itself a bit. Knowing now where Season 4 goes, I almost feel like there is no reason for it to exist, or at the very least to rewatch it. Season 3 ends with the umbrellas losing their powers, and being forced into a brand new reality. They no longer need concern themselves with being superheroes and trying to save the world. Now they are just people. At the start of the show, they were fundamentally broken as individuals in one way or another, and much of the journey of the show has been them trying to learn and grow together, to achieve happiness just as any other person tries to do. By ending on Season 3 with no powers, all they have is each other, and in a sense they are unburdened and can finally live their lives. Now, it's not perfect, as it's very clear the ending of Season 3 is trying to set up for another season with Sloane disappearing and Ben on a train in Korea, but those things aren't answered in Season 4 anyway. I feel like ending the show with Season 3, the possibilities for the characters are limitless, whereas Season 4 itself does nothing but limit them.
I'm really proud of the ending. I think it's the right ending. But what I've left it is it's subjective. Everyone can choose on their own to decide what is that the right ending for this family.
Endings are a tricky thing. Even if they are done well, they can leave the audience bereft, as they are saying goodbye to a story and to characters that they have grown attached to. Some stories are all about the ending, and if the ending doesn't work, then the story at large is undermined, making previously great moments now ring hollow, knowing that in the end, it all amounts to nothing. In my opinion, The Umbrella Academy isn't really one of those stories, as I feel in this instance, the journey itself was more important than the destination. I think in the end, Luther had the right of it.
Maybe we should go around the circle and, share our favorite moments together.
When I think of The Umbrella Academy, the first thing I think about won't be the ending. It'll be all of the cool scenes, character growth, and fun moments that we got to see along the way. Season 4 was bad, really bad even. But it doesn't ruin my enjoyment of the previous seasons, or the fondness I have for its characters. Also, I know for a lot of people Season 4 ruined the show's legacy for them, but for me it still holds a special place in my heart, and I know in the future I will rewatch the series. I just might stop after Season 3. If you somehow made it to the end of the video, I want to thank you for watching. I know it's been a few months since I've posted anything, but I've been really busy with some real life stuff, as well as working on a really big project. I should be back to posting more regularly moving forward. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.